Hello and welcome to the Puyo Puyo Spectator's Guide. In this video, we'll talk about everything you need to know to enjoy watching high-level Puyo matches. Let's jump right in with the fundamentals. First of all, the players' fields are 6 spaces across and 12 spaces high, which equals 72 spaces. However, there is one extra invisible row above the field, making the field total 6 by 13, which is 78 spaces in total. Now what players place on the field are Puyos. When 4 or more of the same color Puyo are connected, they pop. Players receive Puyos in pairs. Each pair is called a piece. The pieces come from the top of the board, in the third column from the left. And at the top of column 3 is an X. When a Puyo lands there, the player loses, so the goal of the game is to cause the opponent to reach the X. Players make chains by clearing one group of Puyos, which causes another group to fall. For example, let's make a 2-chain. Alrighty, so with this green piece here, set it off, send a 2-chain. Now given that there are 78 spaces to place Puyos, you can make up to a 19 chain. The longer a player's chain is, the more garbage Puyos they send to their opponent's field. So, for example, if I send this 2-chain, it'll send around about 1 row of garbage. But if I make a 3-chain, like this, you end up sending way more garbage to your opponent. Now, if you make a 5-chain, in fact, you will send enough garbage to the opponent to instantly win. So let's see how that looks in action. Chain, and the opponent will be forced to take all of the garbage. Now, garbage is special because, as you can see, having 4 of it next to each other doesn't cause it to clear. The only way to clear garbage is to clear colored Puyos next to them. For example, when I clear this group of reds, the garbage underneath it disappears. Similarly, if I clear this group of blues, all of the garbage around it disappears as well. This is how you get rid of garbage. Players can also send lots of garbage by clearing groups of Puyos simultaneously. For example, we saw earlier that a 2-chain sent about 1 line of garbage, but what if a player was to clear a bunch of Puyos at the same time? So this here is just a 2-chain, but let's see what happens when we clear all of this at once. A ton of Puyos being cleared at once means a ton of garbage also sent. The difference between the 2-chain being cleared normally and one that's been powered like this is a massive difference, and what happens is that some players will opt to instead clear really powerful chains instead of longer chains, because the time it takes for these chains to clear is much shorter. Puyo would be a really boring game if all it took was one player sending a strong chain for them to win, and this is why countering exists. Because garbage only falls after a player places a piece, it's possible for them to neutralize the garbage sent by the opponent by sending their own chain before the garbage falls. In this way, they can counter the opponent. So, let's take a look at the opponent here. They're sending a 5-chain over. But let's say we respond with our own chain. We're going to neutralize the garbage that was sent to us. And because this chain is longer, a 6 instead of a 5, it sends the garbage back to the opponent and counters them.
You'll pay for this.
When a player completely clears all of the Puyos on their field, they receive the All Clear bonus. This sends 30 garbage the next time they clear any Puyos. That's a whole 5 rows of garbage. Players will play very differently around an All Clear, because if one player sends an All Clear, the other person still has it afterwards, which means they have to watch out, because if they're unprepared, they'll get hit by the 5 rows of garbage as well. Players will often use specific forms to build their chains. Here are 3 of the most popular. First of all, we have stairs. This consists of making vertical groups of 3, you could call them pillars, and 1 more of that same color in an adjacent column. It's very repeatable, and perhaps the most recognizable pattern. Here's how it looks in action. Another repeatable pattern, just like stairs, is sandwich. The trick with this form is to instead sandwich one Puyo in between the surrounding group of 4 Puyos in order for it to clear. Here's how this one looks in action. Last of all, let's talk about perhaps the most common form that's used by high-level Puyo players. This one is called GTR, or Great Tanaka Renza. It sort of looks like a sock in a shoe. The L shape next to the wall is the sock, and the Puyo surrounding this L create the shoe. Now, unlike other forms, this shape is not repeatable, but it's very flexible, which makes it a popular candidate for high-level players who desire a lot of flexibility in their chains. Here's an example of how a finished GTR might end up looking. In a real match, the general goal for both players is to make a larger chain than their opponent. As such, throughout a round, both players work on continuously extending their main chain to the best of their ability. Top-level players will often place almost all of their pieces without hesitation. At maximum speed, they judge how to create the best chain they can by not only planning with their current piece, but also adjusting their plans based on the next 2 pieces that are coming up as well. To demonstrate, we're going to take a look at some tournament footage from some of the best international Puyo players to use as examples. On the left, we have Void from Brazil, and on the right, we have Rick from Taiwan. This particular round involves both players sending almost equal chains back and forth against each other, forcing them to reconstruct chains from the rubble over and over again. But it gets even more impressive than that. Of course, one way to beat your opponent is to just make your own chain bigger than theirs, but another approach is to actively hinder your opponent from making their main chain bigger than yours. As it turns out, smaller amounts of garbage can be useful too. For example, if a player notices that their opponent can't trigger their main chain quickly, they can make a quick, powerful one chain, and that will cover up access to their chain, reducing the amount of space on their board and wasting their time having to clear the garbage. Here, Rick does exactly that to Void, covering up the critical part of his GTR, and then continuing to follow up with more attacks to ensure Void couldn't get access to his main chain. Another thing a player can do is to send a quick, powerful chain that puts pressure onto the opponent. Receiving all that garbage would put them at a massive disadvantage, or even end the game right there. In this example, Rick sends a very powerful 2-chain that Void isn't prepared to deal with, which forces Void into sending his main chain. Now that Void's chain is going off, Rick has successfully bought himself extra time to extend his main chain so that he can guarantee his own victory. Even though Void's chain up to that point had perfect efficiency, look at that 10-chain all clear. All that extra time allows Rick to counter with a decisive chain of his own, surpassing 10, countering on 11, and ending on a massive 12-chain. Top-level players anticipate this mid-game battle, and so they not only have to focus on building their main chain to be as big as possible, but they also have to set up side chains to attack and defend against their opponent with, while also having to split their focus to watch the opponent's moves so that they can use their resources in the most appropriate way. With all that said, I hope you can come away from this video knowing enough about Puyo to be able to have fun watching high level matches and tournaments. Enjoy!